What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So it took a nice little hiatus, a little break while the format kind of approaches, and here we are. It is tomorrow's release day. We're seeing early openings, things like that. It's exciting. There's dual colors now. So much is changing. So we're here to talk about what are the best decks gonna be, and I got 20 decks that I'm gonna categorize between tier 1, tier 2, Rogue. This does not mean other decks will not pop up. This does not mean these decks won't branch off into multiple different versions. But just as a general kickstart prediction, expectations, if you will, if that makes sense. So today we're going to go ahead and go through those decks and kind of place them, see where we think. Let me know down below if you think I'm wrong. Is something too high, too low? What are we sleeping on? What decks do you plan to play? In addition to that, don't forget to hit that little subscribe button there, because when you do, we get to 5,500 subscribers. We're like 108 away. We're giving a case of set 7 away to a subscriber. So make sure you do that. Also, I'll have a case that we're opening on Whatnot tomorrow. Links for that down below. If you want to come hang out, come hang out. You don't even have to buy in. Just come hang out. Anyway, guys, enough self-plugging. We're going to go ahead and get on into it. Amethyst Emerald, tempo. Where do I want to put this deck? Do I think this deck gets better or worse? I think it kind of stays similar to where it's at, which maybe that's not a great thing. They got some nice cards. I mean, we'll see how much they truly adapt. I do like the Legendary Queen, though, where you get to gain 3, potentially 4 lore just by exerting her and putting cards back into your opponent's deck, especially because we're seeing more strategies now incorporate where they can get stuff out of the discard, especially like blue. This set has incredible ways to get their items back out of the discard, so being able to put 3 of them back in the deck instead is going to be pretty strong. I think it's going to be a solid tier 2 deck. They're borderline tier 1 at the moment and for a lot of this format, so that's why I said kind of maybe regressing a little bit, but not too much. Hyper aggro. This is like all the hyper aggro decks, and hyper aggro is like the whole completely go after it, go big, go home, boom or bust. Not necessarily just aggressive decks, but like the very, very aggressive style decks. And I'm putting these down in Rogue. I don't have a whole lot of faith in them right now. I think that the control decks got really good answers for them in the form of like Bell, Sapphire Coil for Popsicle also just really is going to be strong. And they already had good ways to out your cards. Like now they can even out your cards that have more than 2 willpower or 2 strength pretty easily because of that Sapphire Coil. So I'm just going to put them down in that Rogue category. Blurple, this is a deck that I planned on messing around with quite a bit. It's a deck that I absolutely loved last format. It's a deck that we got our Scar Playmat with last format. I'm going to put it in tier 2 still. How many of the new cards, again, make their way in here? I'm not 100% certain on that, but I want to mess around. I have quite a few ideas with this, and we'll do a whole video breaking it down, what I tried, what worked, what didn't work, things like that, pros and cons. And I believe Lorcana also has the new cards now, so we can start testing on there a whole bunch. So keep an eye out. We'll bring back our 20 match testing series where we test decks for 20 matches, give you guys the results on the play, on the draw, game breakdowns, things like that, matchup breakdowns. So make sure you stick around if that's something you're interested in. We'll go do a bunch of the heavy lifting, try and get you at least a really solid starting basis for a deck. Take that, play around with it, make your changes, that kind of good stuff. Or don't change it if you really like it. That's fine too. Jafar World. This is actually, I got my Scar promo with this deck this past set too. However, I'm going to put them down in Rogue. I think this deck, it's still an interesting deck, and it's each set it's becoming less and less reliant on I have to hit the Jafar combo to win. Like set 6, as good as the Jafar Whole New World is, you could pop off for like 14 lore in a single turn really easily. I don't think that it's incredibly needed. you're still going to run it, you're still going to play it, but now even with things like the giant cobra as just another way to pop off and get multiple lore, just for playing the card, and you can realistically play that and a goat and get like 3 lore in a single turn, or that the queen where you're exerter and get 3 or 4 lore in a turn. You're getting other types of win conditions. Gantu last set was huge for this deck because it applies a ton of pressure to answer it, but they're also trying to answer the Jafar threat. So I think this deck is actually getting better and better, and it might even move into that tier 2 category. Lemon Lime discard. Amber Emerald. I don't think that it got incredibly much better. I think that the best way to play this deck is still going to be very similar to the way to play it in set 5, and I think a big reason that it's down here in Rogue for me is because of that. It's just, I think it's getting a little left behind. Maybe they kind of pick up a few pieces here. I think that the aggressive version is going to be better out of the two, but we already kind of encompassed hyper aggro and talked about them and why I think they're going to be in the Rogue. Maybe one of those hyper aggro strategies pushes its way up to tier 2, but I'm not too sure it will. A lot of players who want to stick to that hyper aggressive strategy are probably going to go diggy hole, and I don't blame them. Like, if you're playing an aggressive style deck, this is arguably going to be your better one to go for. And people might try out a bunch of things, and I'm not saying don't. Like, Bolt might be an interesting card. There might be some other cards to try out in here, but we saw it also with Emerald Steel last set, where people started to realize, hey, maybe I just play how we played it last set, and it worked out really well. So I think people, for as far as diggy hole go, I don't know that we're going to see a whole lot of change into this new set with it. I think it's going to be relatively similar to how it was played in set 6. Ruby Fossa. Once again, I'm hating on this deck. I'm going to put it down in Rogue. I don't think Ruby got a whole lot of great cards here. I don't think Amber's at the height of that list either. Certainly together, I don't think that they improved a ton. So overall, I think that Ruby Fossa is just going to regress a little bit due to it just kind of got left behind. Popsicle. This deck scares me. This deck was already the best deck, and it arguably got the best support in the entire set. Like, this deck really kind of scares me. I do think that there's enough variance that we can keep it at bay between things like Diggy Hole and Purple Steel. I think are both going to have solid matchups into it. But like Sapphire Coil is going to put in so much work and allow those big Sisus to just eat so much. It's going to be tough. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Popsicle take up 40% of the meta. Like, I think this deck is going to transcend from being the best deck of the format to even better than it was, and I think it's going to take up a bigger chunk of that pie chart. I'd be surprised if this deck isn't taking up like over a third of top cut presentations. Like, I full on expect this deck to be in that mid to upper 30s, low 40s% representation in top cut. Not sure how I entirely feel about that, but I really think that this is the best deck of the format. Like, I don't think that there's any debate there. Do you want to play it with more item focused or more like how Dinking Fam had been playing his? That's going to be a little up for debate which version and which way you want to cater it that way. But overall, it's just, this deck's going to be scary, and you better be ready for it. Ruby Amethyst. I'm actually dropping them down to tier 1. I usually say I want to see the fall off before I overreact and do it. I don't think that this deck got a whole lot of support, and it was already starting to dip off towards the end of last set. And more importantly, the good decks from last set got even better. So I think that we're going to see Ruby Amethyst Control finally drop out of that tier 1 category and fall down into tier 2. Emerald Steel discard. We talked about it a little bit, how it started to go back towards its set 5 roots, and I think part of that's going to stay the same. They got some nice tools, so like the new Pete card, the new Gantu card, they got some actual really nice cards to play with. So we might see it change and update a little bit. And overall, I still think that this is a really strong deck in the format, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it actually creep up higher, because I think this might emerge as one of the better counter strategies to the Popsicle deck. That's just, I guess, my prediction, because you can you don't commit as hard and do as many things like into the big Sisu as other decks do, and you attack their hand in that fashion. So Honestly, I could see this deck emerging as a pretty strong counter to the popsicle. Not saying it's going to be like overwhelming or amazing, because we'd put it up at tier 1 then if it was just a slam dunk versus the deck, but I think it can be a thorn in its side and actually be a good counter strategy. Then we got Steel Fossa. I still like this deck more than I do Ruby Fossa, and it came in spurts. Those two went back and forth, but overall Steel Fossa did perform better last set, and I think Steel Fossa got more usable cards to play around with for the next set. So I'm going to say Steel Fossa is going to be my better of the two heading into the next set. Okay, Purple Steel, Cobra. I was very critical on this card initially, and I still kind of am. If you're not playing the aggressive version of this, I don't think Cobra is as insane as it is on paper. In the aggressive, more upfront version, though, I think this card is really, really good. So again, it is dual color, so obviously it has to be played in this color combination. But like overall, just I think that I underestimated the card, but at the same time, I think a lot of people are overestimating it. I think where it actually is going to fall as far as how good the card is better than my initial thought, but lower than what a lot of other people think it's going to be. I still think it's an incredibly strong card. I think Amethyst offers a ton of consistency, and Steel obviously offers that steel removal, and these two just work so well together. In addition to that, you have all the targeting with your Steel, so being able to deal with all of the illusion characters very, very cleanly, that's going to be helpful. The deck can be fast. The deck can play off into that mid game. This is another one of the decks that I plan to mess around with and play quite a bit this format. Emerald Ruby. This kind of is like an anti-meta choice most formats, and I think that's going to stay the same. I think it's going to be a solid rogue deck. It's got some neat cards. Queen of Hearts is kind of cool. Just the way they work, even the King of Hearts, they kind of working in tandem with each other. Overall, though, I still think it's just going to be in that rogue category. Ruby Steel Mushu. Can we just take a moment of silence for my boy Mushu? How is this not the set championship promo, Ravensburger? 2 heroes, the Ursula treatment. Cool. That is so cool. We get a card that's not that great or crazy, and it gets 2 different enchanteds. That's really, really cool. Mushu, on the other hand, one of the best card arts in the entire set, one of the most anticipated, asked for, wanted cards in the Disney catalog, gets absolutely snubbed. If this is not a DLC promo card, I say we riot. I'm just saying, if this is not, they better be holding out on us. They better be holding out that this is going to be like that top 64, top 16 DLC prize card, something like that. Like Mushu needs something. Okay, enough self-pity and ranting. Overall, though, Ruby Steel, I like Ruby Steel in set 6. I think Ruby Steel gets even better in set 7. Saw some pretty crazy things. You go Robin Hood, Calhoun, shift Robin Hood, drop Thebes, move there, Mushu on 5. I wouldn't do that personally. I don't think Thebes is going to find its way in. I think Mushu actually guarantees you not to play Thebes, because Thebes was already a neat little interaction you had at your disposal. However, with Mushu, it kind of power crept Thebes out, and I think it just confirms that Thebes isn't needed and shouldn't be played. So I don't expect to see too many people playing Thebes, but still, like, hitting that Mushu with your Calhoun, your Robin Hood, Queen of Hearts, Sad Beast, like, there's so many good cards. This deck does have more draw power than people want to admit it does. You even have Doc in there too. Like, I'm not saying it's Amethyst. I'm not saying it's got the best draw power, but it's got more than people give it credit for, and I just think the way this deck is played, it has a lot of potential. Is it one of the easier decks to play? No, but at the same time, I think this deck's actually going to be pretty good, and I'm going to go ahead and put it up in the middle, like mid to high tier 2. I think this deck is going to surprise people. Puppies. Where do we put the puppies? Gotta put them in Rogue. Love all the puppy support. Love what they're doing. Love what they're trying to do. But at the end of the day, it's like puppies before. It's like dwarves. It's like these decks where they build this theme, although I think this is probably the most playable one out of that, but it's still at the end of the day not going to be anything crazy. Blue Steel Item. Actually, I got Diggy Holes, my 4th best deck. Blue Steel Item, I'm going to put it number 3. So yeah, Purple Steel to me is the 2nd best deck of the format. Just going to say. I'm putting that out there now. I think Purple Steel is the 2nd best deck of the format. Blue Steel, I'm going in that number 3 category with the items. I just think like Bell is incredibly strong for this deck. Your Sapphire Coil in this deck isn't as impactful as it would be in like Ruby. However, it's still a very strong card. The deck got still the new Tamatoas, still so much new support. Like that is Sapphire. Sapphire got love this set. Like that's all I could say. Sapphire got some love. What about the aggressive version? I don't know how much this is going to change compared to where it was at, but I still think the aggressive version is actually going to be a pretty strong tier 2 deck. It's pretty much there right now, and I think that's going to stay the same. I expect to see Blue Steel. I did separate these two because they are so distinct already. Like I said, maybe we see Popsicle kind of played a few different ways. Purple Steel, less aggressive. We might see a more controlled version, mid-game version kind of develop. This deck, again, adopting whether it's with or without the mind, things like that. Like some of these other decks can be split off like Blue Steel is, but overall, I think this is going to be a pretty solid representation. Baja Blast, green-blue discard, Ink Geyser, Chaos Control. Where is this deck going to go? One of the most broken cards when you first read it. I think it's going to be a really good tier 2 deck. I think it still kind of has its faults, and it has to hit certain lines to really pop off and do well. I still think the deck's more hype than it is hope. I called it out all last set when it first blew up, and it's like, oh, this deck's insane, this deck, and I was like, it's good, but I think it's overrated, and I still think it's a good deck, but I think that it's getting a little more hype than maybe it should. But I'm still going to put it in that tier 2 category because I think that it's just still a really strong tier 2 deck. A deck that I want to see perform before I move it any higher, I'm going to put it right at the top of Rogue with the potential to move up. Green Steel Pirates, they got some love, and that was a deck that I played early in the format. Loved it. So much fun. Actually better than people would give it credit for. 100% mid-tier Rogue deck, though. It got a lot of support. This deck actually got a big buff this set. Is it enough to push it into tier 2? I'm not 100% convinced, and the biggest reason for that, without enough players playing the deck, proving that it's good, it's hard to move it up into the tier list. Overall, is it good enough? Probably. Is it going to see the play to prove it? I'm not sold on that just yet. So for that reason, we are going to leave it in the Rogue category. And then lastly, we have Steel Song. I actually think Steel Song is really good right now, and I think that moving forward, Steel Song is a deck that you should really look out for. It's going to be very strong. It's going to be very consistent. It's going to be a big pain in a lot of aggressive style decks. The fault is, how well does it go into Popsicle? We started to see it get a little bit more aggressive and faster to try to combat that. How will it go? I think Steel Song is one of those decks, so I say it all the time, that as the format develops, the deck changes and it adapts, and then it becomes better and better and better. So let me know what's too high, what's too low. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, guys, for that giveaway next time. Take care.